Afro-Colombians collective land ownership rights. This was an important demand for the black community because, like I said, black communities in Colombia have traditionally been on the two coasts, the Pacific coast and the Atlantic coast, and have often lived in communities collectively, living on the land, using the land, but not having official ownership title to the land. And so, as governments throughout Latin America started to acknowledge that Native Latin American or indigenous populations had the right to ownership of their traditional lands, Afro-Colombian groups and other Afro-Latin American groups made similar demands. And so they got official title, or they got the opportunity to begin a process to gain official legal title to their community lands. This was seen as a big victory in the 90s, but it's an ongoing process, and it's complicated because Colombia is a very minerally rich country, has a lot of attractive natural resources. And those resources are often on lands occupied by Afro-Colombian communities. And so what could have been a simple process of giving title to the Afro-Colombian communities has been complicated because there have been business and political interests who also want those lands, or want use of lands, or want to have access to the land. And so, and if you combine that with the armed conflict ongoing in the country, which has killed thousands and displaced millions over the last 30, 40 years, you have a complicated situation, as you can imagine. Another development in Colombia that should be highlighted is that Afro-Colombians have also complained that they are not adequately represented in their national Congress. And so what this legislation from the 90s has done was to guarantee 2 seats in the Congress for the Afro-Colombian community. And so, since 1990s, I believe since the mid-1990s, these 2 seats have been elected just by Afro-Colombians. I'm still trying to find out the details of how that's done in terms of ballots and voting, but I've met these representatives before, and so they do exist, and Afro-Colombians consider that a triumph, that they guarantee this minimal representation. But obviously, since the Pacific and Atlantic regions are overwhelmingly Afro-Colombian, they also have other representatives in their national legislature. These developments are positive, and I think the result of black activism, black commitment, black political organization, and black demands. Nowhere is it more clear the progress that Afro-Latin Americans have made in terms of politics than in the experiences of 3 major black political figures. I'm talking about Benedita da Silva in Brazil. She's currently a federal deputy. She's been a governor, she's been a senator, she's been a city council person. She is the most famous black Brazilian politician in history. She represents the state of Rio de Janeiro, And she's a tremendous success story because she was born into a favela or a shanty town in Brazil. And she grew up, she had to work as a child. She was a domestic. She cleaned people's homes. She cooked food for white middle-class families. However, she was an activist in her neighborhood, her favela, and people recognized that and remember during the transition to democracy, encouraged her to run for office. She was elected to city council, and she hasn't looked back. She was first elected in 1982 and has held political office, either elected or appointed, since then. And even though she's become very visible and nationally recognized, she hasn't decreased her commitment to economic, social, and racial reform in politics. She's been a strong defender of political change in Brazil. The other politician I want to highlight is Afro-Colombian Piedad Cordova. She's a senator, and she's also been involved in politics for 25 years. She's been a voice for peace, for national reconciliation, for social transformation, and because of her commitment, because of her visibility, she's been kidnapped, her life's been threatened, the lives of her family members have been threatened, and she still has remained strong and remained committed to pursuing the goals that she thinks will help her family and her country. Very impressive. The third politician I want to highlight is Etsy Campbell Barr from Costa Rica. She's also Afro, Latin American, former outstanding member of the Costa Rican Congress, and a leader of the Citizen Action Party. Very dynamic. She has committed her political career to fighting not only against racism, but also against sexism and the negative manifestations both have in Costa Rica and throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And so she's constantly traveling to countries in the Caribbean, countries in Central America, South America, to make the case that these are ongoing problems that we have to confront with courage and dignity and firmness. So I like to point to these three politicians because when Professor Nani Dzinya wrote his survey of Afro-Latin American political activity in the late 70s, he didn't cite any black women politicians. Now, three of the most prominent, most visible, most effective black politicians, political activists in Latin America are black women. I think that shows some progress, even though black women remain underrepresented among black leadership as a whole. Let me conclude by arguing that I believe that impressive progress has been made in terms of black political organizations, black political activity. I think the results of that activity have been uneven in the sense that some laws have been passed